What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Today we have a guest. Her name is Christina. Now, she has her own YouTube channel, and how I discovered that is, we discuss things within the diaspora, but we don't really hear too much of the Afro-Latino side of it. So we wanted to bring Christina in based on some videos I saw from her. So Christina, thank you for joining the show today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so Christina, just for a few people that may not know you or never, seen your channel, could you explain to people, what you do on YouTube?
Okay, so you said my name is Christina. So I started my channel as a makeup tutorial channel. So if you scroll through my channel, you'll see the first like 6 months of my content was beauty related content. Then I started doing non-makeup videos when I posted my Ancestry DNA results video. So that brought a lot of traffic to my channel. And for those of you that don't know, my background is Dominican. I was born here in the US, but my parents, they're Dominican immigrants. So from there, I started doing more videos kind of related to Dominican culture. And then over time, as my channel kept growing, I started doing more videos related to like various Latino cultures, not just Dominican. I've also done videos kind of exploring like different Afro-Latino cultures. Like I've done videos on like Afro-Colombians, on the Garifuna, Central America. Also, I do videos on like different genres of music that have come out of Latin America. I've spoken on some like racial or social issues, but I do a little bit of everything. My audience, it's kind of broad. Like I have Latinos, but I also have a lot of like African Americans that listen to my channel. So I try to create content that everyone would like. And I also get a lot of video requests. So yeah, like I said, I do a little bit of everything on my channel.
All right, so you mentioned your ancestry.com. What was you shown to have in that?
So my initial ancestry results, because they constantly update the results, but my first results put me at 52% African or West African, 40% European, and then 8% Native American. So since the update, the only thing that has changed is I guess they've branched off the North African DNA now. So I don't know if that would count towards well, I guess it wouldn't be the West African, but so that's only like 2% that changed, but the rest of it pretty much remained the same. So my West African DNA, of course, is I had Nigerian, Congolese, Ghanaian, what else? Angola, mainly again West African, and then being Dominican, of course, my European DNA was mainly Southern European. And then as far as my Native American ancestry, I assume it would be Taino, since that's the indigenous group that was in the Caribbean. But yeah, I also did 23andMe, and I also did GEDmatch. Not sure if you heard of that. So I've done a few different DNA tests or whatever, and they all put me about the same percentage, between 50 to 52% African, and then the rest European and indigenous.
All right, so based on your DNA, more than 50%. So it'd be safe to say that you are African descent.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about that. The Dominican Republic, do you know the history of the Dominican Republic? Like how, did our ancestors from West Africa, mine and yours, from West Africa, how did they end up there? And how did that infusion happen? Because it's totally different. Our experiences as Black Americans versus the experiences of a person that's in the Dominican Republic in their history. Could you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so Santo Domingo, which is not the capital of DR, but Santo Domingo was the very first permanent European settlement in the Americas, and it was also the very first colony to import African slaves. So it all began with us right there in DR. I think some people don't always realize that, or a lot of Dominicans themselves, I feel like, don't realize that. Like the introduction of African people, or at least African slaves, began with us. So like I said, we were the first place to import them, of course, by the Spanish. DR was colonized by the Spanish up until the very beginning of the 19th century. After that, DR was occupied by Haiti for 22 years. They gained independence. Then we were re-annexed to Spain, for which DR fought another war up until we became our own nation. So that's basically how the African component came into DR.
Okay, so now it's much different, the slave master relationship with, let's say, Black Americans versus the slave master relationship with Dominicans. Could you explain the difference with that? Because we don't have that attachment like we see Dominicans have.
Yeah. So yeah, I've touched on this a few times on my channel. It's a very interesting yet kind of complicated relationship. But basically, the history of what happened in DR and what led to the African descent people being more attached to the Spanish identity is that after Santo Domingo became a colony, I guess you could say they were kind of like trial and error for the Spanish. So the Spanish ended up losing interest in that colony pretty early on. They went on to move to like the rest of, they went on to Mexico, to Central and South America, and kind of left DR behind. So because of that, the economy in Santo Domingo kind of plummeted, and they were very broke. So because of that, so initially Santo Domingo, they had, sugar plantations and all that. But once the economy kind of, broke down, they moved away from that. And because they were no longer able to afford to continue to import more slaves, that led to the society in Santo Domingo turning to cattle ranching. So when you compare that to what was going on, on the French side, which is now, Haiti, it was a totally different dynamic. So, on the Spanish side, because it was a much less like labor intensive type of work, and because again the colony was so broke, a lot of times the slave master themselves had to be out there working with their slaves. So it allowed them to create almost a type of like familial relationship where it wasn't so much of a power gap between the slave and the master. So that also led to a high rise in like interracial mixing. So I think that's why you see that in Santo Domingo, there wasn't so much of a resistance from the Africans towards the Spanish, at least not later on, because in the very beginning there was. But as time went on, there wasn't so much of that clash there, I guess you could say. But so in a way, I guess you could say that was kind of positive, but the downside to that is that it also made it a lot easier for the Africans to take on their master's identity and kind of leave their African identity behind. And so I think that is kind of where you saw the beginning of these Black people saying that they're now Spanish. And I think that is something that has kind of continued on throughout history. And, we tend to get a very bad reputation for denying our African ancestry and things like that, which, I don't believe most Dominicans deny it. But I think there is a little bit of a psychological component that goes back to these Africans that, they took on their master's identity. And yeah, so that's why most Dominicans today identify more with being Spanish than being African.
Well, let me ask you a question. The Spanish colonizers, is it safe to say that maybe someone was trying to practice a Blockamento, if I'm saying it right, Blockamento, if I'm saying it wrong, correct me.
Blockamento.
There you go. All right. Well, they practicing that. Basically the whitening of the society.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's not a far-fetched idea because they did it in some of the surrounding, countries as well. I think the issue though, it wasn't practiced as heavily in Santo Domingo, which you see that Dominicans in general, we look a little different than say the majority of Puerto Ricans and stuff like that, whereas they tend to be a little lighter and whiter because like in Puerto Rico, they did have that Blockamento, and in Cuba, they actually had laws in place or policies encouraging Europeans to migrate into the country to whiten the population. Now, as far as I know, DR, I haven't read or heard that they implemented any policies like that, because what happened in DR is a lot of the Spanish, like after Haiti took over, they fled. They fled to Puerto Rico and to Cuba. So that's why I think the Blackamento thing didn't really work in Santo Domingo the way it did in some of the other countries or colonies.
Okay, so you mentioned the Haitians. Now, we know the Haitians, kicked Napoleon's butt. I mean, they whipped them, they got him out of there. The French, the French had to run. Okay, and Napoleon was, pretty, big time in his day. But why is it? And we've seen the videos. What is the beef between, fellow Black people, which is Haitians, and other Black people right on the other side in the Dominican Republic? Why is it it's still a beef there? Why?
Oh man, that is a very complicated issue. To be honest, like I didn't grow up really around Haitians. Like where I grew up, I didn't know any Haitians. And for whatever reason, every time that I've gone back to DR, I don't know why, but I just never really run into Haitians. I don't know why that is. Like I'll see them sometimes like selling stuff like in the capital in Santo Domingo, like on the street or whatever, but I've never interacted with them. So I was always kind of indifferent towards Haitians. I didn't really understand what was the beef there, because I had never really looked into it until this past year or so, that I've been learning more about Dominican history, and then realizing or learning what happened like during that 22-year occupation. There was a lot of well, one good thing that came out of the occupation was that, the Haitians did finally abolish slavery once and for all, so that was great. But there were also some not so great things that happened during those 22 years that Dominicans to this day will still bring up. And then, on the flip side, you have like things like the Parsley Massacre, which again, it gets brought up a lot. So I feel like there's been instances in which we have both kind of done each other dirty. And unfortunately, people they're not over it. And then now you have a lot of Dominicans that are constantly bringing up, the illegal immigration of Haitians, and they're taking over DR, and you hear all this type of stuff like that, and people saying that we're just too culturally different. They have another different type of lifestyle. We just don't mesh. That's what you hear some saying. But then I've heard all other Dominicans say that they have no issues with Haitians. And I've seen even videos from Haitians themselves that live in DR and say that they live fine. They don't have issues with the Dominicans there. So honestly, it's just, like I said, it's very complicated. It's just a lot of historical beef that, I don't know, people just don't want to let go. That's kind of how I look at it.
Well, I one thing that I always say, no matter where you're from the Caribbean, here in the Americas, continental Africans, the way the world looks at us, me, you, we just one global Negro to all of them. Like when they see you, they can care less. You're not white, you're not Chinese, you're not whatever else. They're gonna say you're Black, right? So sure, just like on the continent of Africa, you have your inner, beefs or whatever. It's like here in the Americas, we have our little beefs here and there. We all have them, right? But is it safe to say, okay, 2020, we've had a global pandemic. Everybody's kind of like getting to a point they're fighting for themselves. They're like, man, forget Black folks, no matter where you come from, deal with your own issues. Is it safe to say, and we got plenty of Haitian people watching here too, you're a Dominican woman. Is it safe to say, look, we need to figure this thing out and say, okay, we all done wrong to each other. Fine. Let's just go ahead on and just say, let's move on. Let's create something better, because all we have is ourselves. Y'all on this one part of the island, right? And if something hit head on one side, you think it won't get to the other side.
Yeah, I would like for that to happen, because I've said this on my channel too. Like at the end of the day, like we share the same islands. Regardless of what's happened historically, like what affects one side is going to affect the other. So I just don't know how we would get to that point, though. I think that's the difficult thing. I don't know how we'll get to a point where we can just respect each other. And again, I'm not saying that all Dominicans or Haitians disrespect each other or don't like each other, because again, there's people on both sides that don't have an issue with the other. But I don't know, with the way things are going currently, and I don't know, I'm just not sure if how that would happen. But I don't know. I honestly don't know.
Well, let me present something. Okay, what if someone says that someone is to have just a leadership? Let's say the president of Haiti, right? Say, listen, to the Dominican people, there's things that happened in the past. Of course, I had nothing to do with it, but I want to
Yeah.
apologize on behalf of my ancestors and what they have done to you guys. And what I want to do is try to move forward to work in peace. And if the Dominicans can do the exact same thing, say, listen, we apologize for the things that were done, because there were some things done to Haitians, especially that one president you guys had that literally massacred at least 20,000.
Yeah, the
Okay.
Parsley massacre.
Okay. We know about that. So
Yep.
let's say the Dominican president say, okay, I want to apologize and do whatever we can do, see what we can do to move forward. We're not saying who's right, who's wrong. We had nothing to do with it. It's 2020. Can we come together? Now, if that happens, do you think that you guys could come together? Because at the end of the day, remember, we're all one global Negro, okay? So do you think that could possibly, if those apologies come from both sides, because both sides have done things they shouldn't have, do you think that on that island, Hispaniola, could y'all move forward?
Well, I think that would be a good start. I think the question would be more, would they be willing to accept the apology? I mean, I think some would, but there are some There are some Dominicans that I've seen that are just very like, I don't want to hear it. I don't like Haitians. I don't, we're too different. They're over here taking up all our resources, and our hospitals are full of Haitians. I don't know.
So let me ask you a question then. How does Dominicans feel about Europeans?
Well, you definitely don't hear them bad mouthing Europeans as much as they do Haitians. Yeah, there's definitely some what's the word? Is it Stockholm syndrome? Maybe that's it. Yeah, I think because a lot of Dominicans see themselves being more like an extension of Europeans than other Black people. So I mean, again, I can't speak for all Dominicans, but yeah, you definitely don't see that as much.
Even though, let me ask you another question. No, I'm sorry, because it just popped in my head and I'm gonna forget exactly what I'm saying. So earlier you said that they kind of took on the identity of their slave master. Am I correct in what you said?
Yeah.
So to this day in 2020, they was enslaved. Did Haitians practice hundreds of years of slavery against Black? I'm saying because you're Black. Other Black people that just spoke Spanish, did they practice that? Or was it the Europeans that did that?
The Europeans.
Okay. So I've seen stories, and you probably seen the same thing. Europeans come there, just like they go to the Gambia and other places, and they go to exploit the poverty, which a lot of them have caused themselves. Okay. And they're out here buying children and doing God knows, we all know what they're doing with children. And they try to do this mess openly and take advantage of. I don't really see big stories of the Haitians doing it. Why is it these people are still accepted again over the Haitians? I'm just trying to understand that.
But like I said, I think it's because a lot of Dominicans, they identify more with Europeans. So they'll justify or kind of make excuses for some Europeans coming into the country and doing certain things. Like right now, the big thing is all of these like expats and whoever coming into DR for like prostitution. There's a lot of people that have been talking about that, but the focus is always on the Black men that do this. But people don't really talk about the white men that do it, or the Europeans that are coming in and doing the same exact thing. So I don't know. I feel like, and some Dominicans might get mad if you're saying, but I feel like it's kind of hypocritical. Like, I don't know, that some Dominicans are a lot more quick to jump on like Black people for doing certain things, or Haitians or whatever, than they would to jump on like white people or Europeans for doing the same thing.
Interesting. So basically what you're saying is we have a bunch of self-hate going on in the Dominican Republic, and it's not based off of what you're actually doing. It's based off of who you are. Is that safe to what you're saying?
But I mean, there is some level of self-hate, yes. I mean, at this point in time, though, like most Dominicans do acknowledge that they have African ancestry. So I don't think it's so much that, or that they hate that aspect of themselves. But although they acknowledge their African ancestry, at the end of the day, they still, how can I say, align culturally more with Europeans or Spaniards than they do with Haitians. Again, there's like this idea that we are just two totally different, like polar opposite cultures. Even though I may be a Black Dominican, you're a Black Haitian, but at the end of the day, I am totally different to you. But I share more culture. I'm more culturally alike to this Spanish person. That is a mentality that a lot of people have, if that makes sense.
No,
So,
I hear exactly what you're saying. And let's just keep it real. I'm culturally different than you because Black Americans, we are our own culture.
yeah.
I'm culturally different than a Haitian. I'm culturally different than someone from Nigeria or South Africa. There's nothing wrong with having a different culture, but at the end of the day, when it all goes down, this world is ran by the skin color. Unfortunately, it's not ran by culture.
Right.
So, no, go ahead.
Yeah. So to say that it's self-hate, I don't know. I mean, I think for some, their level of self-hate can be why they hate Haitians, because they don't like their own Blackness, and because to a lot of people, Haitians are like the epitome of Blackness, so it makes them easy to dislike them, But I don't think that's necessarily the case for most Dominicans, though. Yeah,
Okay.
I don't think it's so much self-hate. It's like I said, it's a very complicated thing, especially when it comes to Haitians. Like there's no real black and white answer to that.
Well, I'm just basing off of what you're saying. I'm just listening, like I'm just taking it all in. And earlier you said that you talked about the brothers. I know what you're talking about. Brothers going to DR, they make all kind of videos talking about brothers going to DR, and they say, "Oh man, the Dominican women and this and that and the third," but they're going over there, with Black women, obviously, right? And you said earlier that how the Europeans come in. Now these brothers that's talking about this, they're not going after children. They're talking to women, from what I know. Okay, what they promote, you know that. But these guys are coming in talking about, and it's sickening me. These Europeans are coming in, like I said, not just a DR, but they go into the Gambia too. We've covered this, and they're fooling with children. So they have more problems with Black American men. The chatter. I'm not saying they went approach them or did them anything. So the chatter is Black American men over Europeans fooling with children. I mean, do you understand like why I say that's really a self-hate issue? So I can't stand the Black American man or the Haitian man, but the white man is coming in doing this dirt. Oh, well, we got some little attachment to him. You overlook him? I'm not saying you. I'm just saying in general.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, that's what I've seen. And I even made a video addressing this one time. And I said this same thing, like, how is it, like, okay, I get it. The loudest ones on YouTube, at least, it is the Black American men. Like, it is, I get it. They're the ones that have been bringing the most attention to themselves on YouTube. But at the same time, it's like, I feel like, well, if you're gonna point this out from this group, then have the same energy for everybody. Why is it that you guys seem to be more upset with this specific group of men doing this, but you kind of turn a blind eye to these men over here doing it? Like, I don't know, I guess you could say it's a level of self-hate, or just viewing white people at a different standard than they do Black people.
So, and I've said this before. I've been to the continent of Africa. I haven't been to the Dominican Republic because, you know, just from what I've seen with Haitians and Dominicans, you know, sometimes I'm just even wondering if I would even be welcome there based off of some things I've seen. I'm talking about Dominican Republic. I'm just being straight up honest with you. I'm like, oh, I don't know about DR like that, because it kind of bothers me, because I had talked to a Dominican woman one time, and she was having a conversation about some things. And when my response, she said that she said in front of me that she wasn't Black. And I'm looking at her in her face. I'm like, I'm clearly seeing a Black woman in my face. And I say, you're not Black? No, I'm not Black. I say, well, what are you? I'm Dominican. And so I'm just sitting up here just like, well, I'm confused. I say, yes, nationally you are. I say, but racially you would be Black. No. I'm not Black. So let's get into that conversation, because you talked about that. And for people that never heard your speech on that, could you explain why they don't want to say they're Black?
Well, it depends. It depends if you're talking about Dominicans here in the US or Dominicans over there. So are you referring to Dominicans in DR?
Let's talk about both of them. Let's talk about Dominicans here in the US first, and then let's get to the DR.
Okay, well, as far as Dominicans here in the US, and I'll use myself as an example. So, I mean, I'm Dominican American, but anyway. So in my experience in the area where I grew up, the only group that I ever saw like vocally identifying as Black was African Americans. Okay, so in my area, only they use the label Black. But all the other people of African descent, they would identify by their nationality or their ethnicity, whatever. So, you know, even some of my own African American friends, they would say, "Oh, Christina, she's not Black, she's Dominican." Or if somebody asked me, "Are you Black?" I knew that what they were trying to ask me was if I was African American. Because most people, I mean, they could tell you look Black, but you look like, I don't know, you don't necessarily look African American. So, you know, I get asked all the time. So, and, you know, a lot of other Dominicans have said this too, you know, where I grew up, we're in the hood, only Black Americans would call themselves Black. The rest of us didn't use Black. So it's kind of a way as differentiating yourself from the African American group. Now, I know, and I've said this on my channel too, I know that that's not like correct, because at the end of the day, I mean, Black is a race. I mean, it's not exclusive to African Americans, but that's just the way some of us grew up. So even in my experience, like I didn't really grow up identifying as Black. Like, I mean, on paper I would, like if I, you know, once I was a teenager, if I had to like fill out a job application or something, I would put Black as my race, because I figured, well, I look like African American, so let me put Black. But yeah. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of like the experience a lot of us have here in the US. And that's why you'll hear a lot of Dominicans, especially the noticeably dark ones, saying, "I'm not Black, I'm Dominican." Now, as far as on the island, so I think the difference, and this goes, I think for a lot of Caribbean countries, is that the word Black, it's more like an adjective. It's more of like a descriptive label. So people that call themselves Black or Negro or Negra, or who are referred to as such, it's more a matter of your skin color. So if you're dark in color, then it's more likely that you'll call yourself Negro or Negra, or that somebody will call you that. So a lighter skinned person may not necessarily go by Negra. They might be called trigueña or trigueño, or there's a bunch of different names for skin tones. So I think that's one reason why you'll see that certain people will not call themselves Black, but they'll use some other type of description for their skin color. Yeah.
Okay, so now when an African American hear a Dominican say, "Oh no, I'm not Black," I mean, it sounds like you guys don't want to have no association with Black Americans when we say that. And do you understand, like, well, at least when we hear it, how at times we feel like, okay, you rather more association with the former slave master than the people that you really connected to at the end of the day?
No, I mean, I can definitely understand that. And I do think that for some people, I mean, it's not just Dominicans, even other Afro Latinos, like that when they're very like, I'm not black here in the US, it's because yeah, they don't want to be associated with African Americans, because a lot of people, even back, in their countries, they are fed these negative images of African Americans. And I think that's a big part of the problem, because like, the media or whatever, a lot of times they do portray African Americans in a very negative light. And so people in other countries, they see that. And so they form this idea, oh, that Black Americans, they act like this and they act like that, and when once they get here, it's like they have to make that distinction. Well, I'm not like them. I'm not that type of Black person. So I do think, yeah, that's definitely part of it for some people.
Okay, so basically, you telling the exact same story as maybe some continental Africans would say. We've heard all this bad stuff about Black Americans, and so we don't know, about. And so it seems like to me, just based off, and that's what I love about today. We can all connect, right? The white supremacists have done a great job of smearing the name of Black Americans. Do
Oh,
you
yeah.
agree with that?
Oh, yeah.
Because let's call it what it is. Black Americans have been one of the greatest fighters against oppression, bar none. I will
Yeah.
say, and also the Haitians, of course, too. I'm not going to leave them out. Okay, but they're still all in the same hemisphere. And what is the excuse now? Now we have the internet. Now we all can be connected. Even continental Africans are seeing that. Wait a minute, that stuff's not true, because a lot of us are traveling to the continent constantly. There's some of us actually have moved. Some of us have gotten businesses there. I mean, what is the feeling now? Because at one point in time, okay, we had an excuse, but today in 2020, we really don't have an excuse with the internet. So what is your take on that?
Well, I think a lot of Latinos, particularly like Black or Afro-Latinos, whatever you want to call yourself, I do think there's definitely been a shift where you do see a lot more Latinos now claiming that label and saying that they're Black, or there's not so much of, I guess, that push on the one side against African Americans, because now a lot more Latinos are seeing themselves as being parts of the greater African diaspora. Whereas before, I mean, don't get me wrong, like there's always been like, Black Latinos that have been very aware of their Blackness and their African roots. But I think there's definitely been more of an awakening, I guess you could say, among a lot of Latinos. So, there's still going to be those that, they're going to try and distance themselves from Blackness or from their ancestry or from African Americans, whatever the case may be. But I definitely feel like there has been a greater movement, especially with the Afro-Latino movement and how much pace that has gained and how big that's getting, where we're seeing an opposite thing now, like in a positive way. Because you said, I mean, there's no excuse now to not know what the deal is. So I don't know. I think a lot more are starting to embrace that. Whether they embrace just calling themselves Black, regardless of their skin color, or calling themselves Afro-Latino, whatever the case is, or just even viewing African Americans as their fellow, brothers and sisters. So yeah, I definitely think there's a shift happening right now.
And I would say this, and I'm glad she did this. Amara La Negra, she really started to discuss that that issue, and she really opened up the door to that conversation. I'm like, oh, I was so glad to hear her say that, because a lot of times, with the media, they keep us thinking that like we are only our own group of Black people, and then these other ones, oh, be careful with them or whatever, right? We hear all the bad things about each other. Even on this side, right? So with people like Amara La Negra, and now we're seeing that, and even she talks about even in the Latin world how Black people discriminated against, and I've seen like the open racism, white supremacy against Afro Latinos in those countries. I mean, it's bad. Some of the things I saw. You hear about those stories and seeing how openly racist they could be.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of Latinos tend to think that racism is only an American thing. And a lot of Latinos also think that because so many of us are, you know, mixed because of all the race mixing that happened in Latin America, that somehow that got rid of racism, which that's obviously not the case. Because while many of us are, you know, can be considered mixed race, I mean, there's still a lot of Latinos that are predominantly European, but there's also many that are predominantly African. And, you know, wherever there was colonization, wherever there was a history of slavery, you're going to have like that after effect of some white people thinking they're superior and, you know, being racist towards Black people. Like, I don't know why some people act like Latin Americans are exempt from that. So yeah, I mean, I've definitely heard stories. There was like I remember learning a few months ago, that there was a Cuban KKK. Like, I didn't even know that until recently. Like, they had their own chapter there in Cuba, and they like murder, like I don't know how many thousand Black Cubans after like this one election or something that happened. So I mean, yeah, it's definitely happened in Latin America as well. There's no denying that.
Yeah, I think is it Equatorial Guinea. That is and I didn't even know this myself, not mistaken. That is a Spanish speaking country. Am I correct?
Yeah, and off the coast of Africa.
Yeah, yes, in Central Africa. So,
Hmm.
which that's the only Spanish speaking. I know Angola is the Portuguese, section there for people that maybe
Hmm.
Brazil, etc. Now, is the discussion, in your communities and circles and with Dominicans, do you guys talk about going to Africa for any reason, like to visit to see how different things are to connect?
No, at least I haven't heard it. Um, Nah, I don't really hear about Dominicans talking about going back to Africa to visit or just to learn. Even though I did recently see a video on YouTube of these two Dominican guys that went to Africa, which I mean I'd never seen anything like that. So that was like really like, you know, heartwarming, and like it was really touching to see that. But for the most part, nah, Dominicans, I don't really hear them talking about going to Africa.
That is really interesting. So, like for us, like a lot of, Black Americans, they say, hey, I want to at least see it at least one time. It's
Yeah.
not to say I'm gonna move, but I at least want to go. And then it's like literally a spiritual experience when you go. I mean, that's what happened to me literally when I went. So you believe maybe, just maybe, because they still had that connection to the colonizers, why they have no interest?
Possibly. Yeah, because I mean I've always heard of Dominicans wanting, they either go to like, well, as far as European is concerned, they either go to Spain or Italy. Those are like the
Mm.
two countries I see a lot of Dominicans like either migrating to, like to actually go and move there. And I mean to an extent I do think language is part of it, but um yeah, no, I don't know. I don't ever hear of Dominicans showing interest in going to Africa. And it's like it's weird. It's like we know that well, most Dominicans know, yes, part of our ancestry is African. Because that's the thing. Dominicans are taught that we are a mix of three things: European, African, and Native American. Like that is the general education or whatever that Dominicans get. But at the same time, it's like, at least from what I have observed, I feel like Dominicans are more taught to see either the Taino, the Native American like traits or whatever that we may have, or the European ones, not so much the African ones, even though I feel like the African ones are so obvious, you know? I feel like it's so apparent in so much of our culture and our music and our dance, but it's like we're not taught like, you know, Africans are people too, and it's okay if you want to go to Africa and see that side of your ancestry. Like, I don't know, I feel like we just don't really have those conversations.
Right. And even all the dances that you guys are doing, I've done the research on that. All that come from West Africa.
There's definitely a lot of, yeah, a lot of African influence. I mean merengue itself, I mean, I don't know if this is true or not, but the theory is that the dance came from slaves that had like shackles, or they had chains or whatever, and they had to like drag one foot, which is like where the two-step motion of merengue comes from. But then like the pairing of merengue and bachata apparently came from the slaves mimicking their slave masters. So that's where like the couple dancing came in. But I mean, yeah, it's definitely a lot of African influence in everything. So I don't know, it's very odd. But I think the younger generations, though, like, I think we are going to be the ones to kind of change that because, like I said, there are a lot more Dominicans even that are really starting to explore that side of their ancestry. So I'm hoping, that will be what kind of brings the change. And I think, especially like those of us here, like us Dominican Americans, I think we also influence a lot of what the Dominicans back on the island think. So I think if we can kind of spearhead that to where it's like, you can be proud of your European ancestry if you want, but it's okay to be proud of your African ancestry as well. Like, it's a big part of who we are, like, why not be proud of it? And not just that, but, I've mentioned this on my channel too, but like out of all the Spanish speaking Latin American countries, we are the country with the highest amount of African ancestry. So even a lot of other Latin countries look at us as the Black ones, So I don't know. It's just a complicated thing.
Oh, it's not complicated at all. I'm listening to everything you're saying. It's very simple, actually, for me. I mean, even the Tainos themselves, they were your color. They weren't white.
Yeah, they weren't. Yeah, they weren't light skinned.
Yeah. So yeah. I mean, so the Tainos and the Africans, and way before Columbus got here, I mean, when he got here, he saw a black island. He didn't see no people that looked like him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right.
Exactly. So it's from what you're telling me, and like I said, this is how we learn and this is how we grow. We have these conversations. We hear like the thought process instead of because a lot of times when we don't understand some things, the first thing we do is get offended. So we hear Dominicans say, "Oh no, I ain't Black." You hear that, of course, you get offended because like, well, what are you then? Negro. That's the first thing we start thinking. But now you're breaking it down. What's the connection with the slave master, etc. So yes, this definitely has some work to do. And this kind of conversation is good because you say, let's say if a Dominican person on an island, let's say they watch this, conversation, then it's good to have that because, like you said, you could be influencing a lot of Dominicans in what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, it's just difference in like racial identity. I mean, I think here in the U.S., it was very two-toned. It's like you were white or you were Black, but especially in the Caribbean, it wasn't like that. Racial identity, it existed on more of a continuum between white and Black. So that's why you had, a lot of people, even to this day, that still use words like mulatto, mestizo, sambo, trigueño. I mean, there's so many labels that describe different racial mixes. So I think that's also why you may see people that are obviously of African descent, but they may not necessarily identify as Black or Negro, but they'll identify with some other label that refers to a type of mixture that has Black in it. So I think that's why we also sometimes clash. It's just different ideologies, different racial systems. And then I feel like sometimes we don't take the time to understand each other. And so that's why you see people on both sides getting offended,
Right. Well, one thing I have learned, by going to the continent and even you guys as well, Africans, people from the Caribbean, they more so identified nationally. For instance, like I'm Dominican, I'm Nigerian, I'm Ghanaian, but Black Americans, because we've built this country. Literally, America is our baby that grew up, but yet they made sure to keep us at a 5th class citizen status. So we can't claim America. Oh, yeah, we are Americans and we are this and that. And we could claim that, but they don't allow us to enjoy the full power of America as we should have enjoyed based on being the builders of this nation. So when you guys, let's say if a Nigerian come in, they'll say, "Oh, I'm Nigerian." Like, what do you mean you're Black? No, I'm Nigerian. So they do the same thing too. But I guess maybe if everyone looked like you, because our ancestors didn't live in a land and look all Black, like Nigerians or maybe Dominicans or etc. So do you think maybe it could be some of that you guys just identify more nationally than when you step into the racial, because everything is based here on race? Do you think maybe that's the culture shock then to a point?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. And I've heard a lot of not just Dominicans, but other Latinos as well speak on that and say that, because they, like, back in these countries, or in DR, most people, I mean, they don't necessarily identify so much by race. Everybody identifies with their culture. And then, of course, how you have societies that didn't necessarily experience segregation. Well, with the exception of Cuba, they did have segregation. But like in DR, there wasn't segregation. There wasn't Jim Crow or nothing like that. Everyone shares the same culture, regardless of whether you're white, black, mixed, whatever. So people, they identify with their culture. They identify with their nationality. And so they come here, and it's like they're kind of being forced now to identify by race. So in a way, it is kind of new to them. And I think that's why you see kind of like a resistance there, like, what? No, this is what I am. I am my nationality. I am my culture. I'm not a color. So I do think that is part of it. Like, honestly, in my upbringing, my parents rarely talked about race. Like, my knowledge of race came from school and being around, other, like, African Americans, being around other people. I wasn't taught, you're black or whatever. I was just taught, oh, we're Dominican. So, and I was growing up in the US. So there's definitely a bit of a gap there of understanding. Yeah. So, like, I do think that's part of the issue.
Yeah, and that's I believe that is part of definitely the issue. But like I said, I'm glad we're having this conversation, and many people will be listening to this conversation, and we can learn, because I'm all about us all coming together in the diaspora, and sometimes, yes, there's some history to things, as you stated, the why some of us are part, but at the end of the day, the colonizer was in the middle of all of that, causing those beefs. It's not like we just had these beefs on our own and we just didn't like each other. So as we go forward, like I was telling, you prior to this, I want to try to have the Afro-Latino story in the midst of everything too, because we can't forget nobody as a part of the diaspora. So Christina, tell people, how they can get to your YouTube channel. They may want to ask some questions or maybe contact you, because maybe they say he should have asked her this, and say, well, that's why I get contact information. So how people get in contact?
Yeah. So the name of my channel, it's Viva Bella. So VIVABELLA by, and then Xtina. Viva Bella by Xtina. That's where you can find me. And in all of my videos, I put all of my contact information. I have I have two Instagrams. I have a makeup one, and then one that is like my YouTube content. So I have those on there. I have an email that I use for my YouTube subscribers if they want to email me. And I also have a Twitter, even though I don't really use it. But yeah, that's how you can find me.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, as always, we'll put the contact information below in that pinned comment. You can go check it out, click it. You can follow her or ask her any questions. But Christina, we definitely thank you for joining us today and having just a great conversation on, the identity of Dominicans and just how, different things have been historically. It's definitely good for us to hear these, kind of learning experience conversations.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I hope that I represented Dominicans well. I mean, I don't know, some Dominicans out there might not agree with everything that I said. I do get some Dominicans that get upset with me on YouTube, but yeah. I mean, I just try to speak as honestly as I can, but while also kind of like defending why Dominicans do what they do, because I do feel like in a way we're kind of misunderstood at times. And people like to kind of run with the negative, images of us that they're fed, which isn't always the case. We have our bad apples, but we're not all that bad. We're really not. Yeah.
All right, Ms. Christina. Well, thank you definitely for sharing it. And anybody that's upset in the comment section, like I said, hey, it's a conversation. You could ask her questions if you would like, but don't direct them at me. I didn't see.